Inside America's Boardrooms, the informational show for board members and corporate secretaries. Brought to you with knowledge partners NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, R.R. Donnelly, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm T.K. Kerstetter, the CEO of Boardroom Resources, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the show. Once again, we're going to be coming to you remotely. We're out of the confines of the NASDAQ market site in New York, and we're in the Hilton and Sallie Dean Institute of Corporate Governance and Integrity here at the Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee. We're going to be talking about when ethics and performance coexist. And I have a great guest that's going to deal with this sensitive topic with me. And let me introduce him right now. Welcome Turney Stevens, who is a board member with the KCAP Financial Inc. and is also the chair of their NomGov committee. He is also the director of the Hilton and Sallie Dean Institute for Corporate Governance and Integrity at Lipscomb. And Turney, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thanks, TK. Welcome to Lipscomb.
Well, it's my pleasure, and we love the concept of doing a remote. We're able to attract some high-profile Nashville CEOs and board members, and it's a perfect place for us to do it. And the fact that we're at the Dean Center lets us tackle a topic which you and I both know is not an easy topic to sort of get our arms around. And we're going to be talking about, again, integrity, ethics, things that some people might call soft issues, but when you sort of violate that, they become very hard, okay? And the first thing I'd like to do is, the Dean Center focuses on corporate governance and on integrity and the ethical responsibilities of a board member. Let's start by trying to break that down a little. And how do you sort of apply those principles and values to sort of one's everyday responsibilities as a board member?
Well, let me go back to the founding of the Dean Institute in 2008, because I think it will help to answer your question about the work of the Institute, to review just very briefly the instigation of the Institute. When I arrived from my career as an investment banker and became the Dean of the College of Business here, we received a very generous gift from Hilton and Sallie Dean. Hilton had retired as the chief financial officer and one of the vice chairs at Ernst & Young Worldwide, was at that time our board chair here at Lipscomb. The period 2008, as you'll recall very clearly, was a period of great turmoil in the American business world. We saw a number of ethical scandals, Enron, WorldCom, HealthSouth, and so forth. And so Hilton and Sallie gave us a very generous seven-figure gift and said, will you please use this to do something that will hopefully address some of the issues that we're observing in America's boardrooms. So we created the Hilton and Sallie Dean Institute for Corporate Governance and Integrity with two missions. The first was to discuss, communicate, and hopefully to evolve best practices of good corporate governance, particularly in the boardrooms of America. The second mission was to focus on the word integrity and to talk about how character is formed and how character plays out in the businesses of America, not just on academic campuses like Lipscomb, but also how the tone at the top determines the culture of a corporation. And so we've spent the past 7 years thinking about that, as well as talking about it around the world. In the last 12 months, for example, I've spoken on 4 continents, generally about that topic. How do we get people to do what's right? And that's the work of the Dean Institute.
Well, when I hear words like ethics and integrity, I think of two things. I think of company culture, and I think of an individual's core values. And certainly in the company, the CEO and the board sort of shape what an organization is like. And sometimes that falls on the board because you have CEOs that come and go, but the core of the board is supposed to sort of maintain that culture and find somebody that either supports it if it's good or changes it if it's bad. And critical decision making, there's nothing in a culture, there's nothing more true than actions speak louder than words, because you can say what you want, but there are watershed events that come in front of the CEO or front of the board that will determine what kind of culture you have. Let me give you a perfect example. Global company has sales goals in its different countries. There's a performer out there in a foreign country that meets and exceeds his goal. He's featured and praised and bonused. But everybody knew that he got there by cutting corners, okay? And globally, FCPA is a huge issue. Well, that came to light, okay, that he had reached his goals by, in this case, bribing officials, okay, which is not uncommon in some countries, but certainly something that would be outside of what is competing ethically. So the board all of a sudden was faced with this issue of what do we do with that? Now, good for this company, the board and the management ended up firing the salesperson because they recognized if that action didn't occur, the message that would be sent to the culture of the rest of the company, everybody would be cutting corners or doing that. So it's a perfect example of that. But when you look at situations like that, how does a company change its culture? How does it go about a board and a CEO changing something that they aren't happy with in the way of culture today?
Well, I think you touched on exactly the right tone when you said that it starts at the top. And in my experience, both as a public board member as well as a practitioner and now as an academic, I think that it's absolutely clear that if the signals don't come from the top on a consistent basis, the organization will not take the cues and will not respond to that. How do you change a culture? Well, that's a much more challenging and difficult issue. Once a culture is set, it's almost like a ship in the night. It's very difficult to stop that, turn it around, and move it in a different direction. If it can be done, it can only be done from the top, only from the decision that a board makes. Through the board, the CEO is hired, the CEO is reviewed, the CEO is compensated. I love the work that Ben Heinemann has done at Harvard as he's written the book High Performance with High Integrity from his experience at General Electric. One of the things that GE made the decision to do early on was to incorporate into their performance appraisals of their business unit leaders, their CEOs, a factor for the integrity and culture of the organization that CEO led. And so therefore the compensation that was paid to each of those business unit leaders was at least partially the result of how well that person did the right thing, how well that person led his or her organization, not only from a profit standpoint, but also from an ethical and integrity standpoint. And Ben Heinemann and GE developed various metrics where that could be quantified and measured. We probably don't have the time this morning to talk about all of that, but it can be done, it has been done, and it will be done by organizations that make the commitment to do it, and that starts at the top.
You know what's sad about that, though, because that's discretionary evaluation of one's job, which I think culture should definitely be part of somebody's review. But if you look at the proxy advisory firms and whatever, the more discretionary, non-measurable stuff that goes into that, the more that your comp committee is under fire, okay? Particularly if there's an appearance of there's not pay for performance. So it's not, I guess it's not easy.
So one of the campaigns that I've tried to pursue from my platform here at Lipscomb University, the Dean Institute, is a campaign to put more responsibility on the shoulders of non-gov chairs. It seems to me, and I'm speaking as a public company non-gov chair, it seems to me that it is incumbent on chairs of nominating and governance committees to insist that these things take place within the organizations that they have some responsibility over. If the board as a whole won't do it, if a CEO won't do it, then it certainly should be done by the non-gov chair. And until the non-gov chairs and until the organizations that evaluate companies' performance, the proxy services, insist on it, we'll continue to see mediocre results. We certainly can measure these things. There's no reason why it shouldn't be incorporated into the evaluation of a corporation to just simply ask questions like, have you paid a fine? Have you been judged guilty or even pleaded no contest to charges that you might be guilty of things that are nefarious? And this is happening every single day in this country, and in terms of huge settlements that are being made by corporations, and it's got to stop.
We could spend hours. We've only sort of just nipped around the edges of this issue. People a lot smarter than us are trying to, figure out again how to put metrics, for us to understand this. I firmly believe that, again, companies you mentioned or companies like Tractor Supply, who's one of our guests on the show, I think these companies believe in doing what's right. So maybe we're going to have you back again so that we can go at least into the next level of things. But I wanted to thank you not only for you joining me, but also giving us the venue of being here on Lipscomb's campus. And it's great to be here in Nashville.
Well, we're delighted to have you. Please come back again. We're honored to have you on the campus and delighted that you can use the Mulliken Studios. Thank you for being here today.
And that will conclude this session of Inside America's Boardrooms. We'll be back again next week with a critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.
Join us again next week for Inside America's Boardrooms. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors, Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, R.R. Donnelly, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.